The Nashville of 50 years ago truly was a small town, or make that many.
Nashville, what we call Nashville, Davidson County now, was just a whole bunch of tiny little community boroughs. And many of those boroughs, the names survived, like, Donaldson and Hermitage and Creve Hall, and those cities were real. And they had police departments, and they had their own governments, and they had their own traffic laws, and they had, their own jail. The time that all of this happened, we were really only a decade away from all these little tiny tight-knit communities. Nobody knew anybody outside their community. It was unthinkable for us to go to East Nashville. Absolutely unthinkable. And nobody from East Nashville ever came to West Nashville.
This lifelong resident will tell you connectivity was old school.
We didn't have an internet. We didn't have cell phones. We had the phone book. It was like Google for people. We're all listed in the phone book. And you could actually relist your friends under fake names. And so that became a big thing.
So some people could hide that way in some regards.
Yes. And lots of things hid that way. Lots of change was happening with young people. And one of the things that was changing was the way that women were interacting with sort of a new sense of freedom. We couldn't have credit cards. We had to pay for everything in cash. If you were going to buy anything of any size, a father had to sign for you, or you had to be married. Opening bank accounts was not possible without a co-signer. The healthcare industry in Nashville was a completely patriarchal system, especially when it came to obstetrics and gynecology. And so your access to healthcare came from a male-dominated healthcare system. Well, first of all, girls did not go to OBGYNs. You didn't do that unless you were married. And if you did go to an OBGYN as an unmarried female, you would certainly never confide in that person. Your health information was readily available to your male partner or to your husband, or even in many cases to a father. And in, I think, a lot of cases, probably depending on who you were and whose kid you were, whose daughter you were, you might have found yourself being discussed at country clubs. It was just called The House. The house started in, I think it was about 1970. It might have been 71. I know it was there in 72. And it opened as a hotline for teens, mostly, and young adults. And it was in the phone book. The name of the house varied depending on the year. And information about the house spread only by word of mouth. We all trained, and that's why I'm familiar with it, is that volunteers came in and trained to work overnight in the crisis center and take crisis calls. The crisis center was slammed busy. She walked in the front door to the left was what would have been, I think, the dining room. And what it was a long wood table that had been constructed, and there were probably 10 phones on that one line, on that one table, and folding chairs. And the phones never stopped ringing.
Sounds like a telethon almost.
It was. I mean, that's exactly. I mean, if I had to compare it to something, it felt a lot like a telethon.
So what percentage of the calls were, I think I'm pregnant?
A lot. What we didn't have a lot of were people who were married with children. And the house had 2 stories, and we could send anybody to the 2nd floor. But I don't remember sending a lot of guys up there. The guys who needed help, it was usually, they thought they might have had an STD or something. But my memory is that the 2nd floor operated from like 5 or 6 in the evening all night long until the morning.
And was there expertise up there?
It was understood that all of the care providers, who I remember as being 100% male, that they were all medical students.
We spoke with several women who say they had abortions at the house before Roe v. Wade and after. None could point us to the exact address. In fact, they had different recollections.
The procedure rooms were in the back of the 2nd floor that faced the alley. The front rooms were jammed with exam tables, makeshift, and there were standing curtains that divided the tables, and the tables were always full. And you were talking to some guy with no name who was going to help you, no matter what it was you needed.
Did money change hands, or how was this thing funded?
I don't remember anybody paying for anything. And you would walk out with supplies, birth control pills, antibiotics. There were syringes and injectable drugs. There was other equipment. The Nashville Police Department, there's absolutely no way they didn't know.
Could something like this happen again?
This is one way it can happen if people don't talk a lot. And I worry about, the fact that within 2 seconds I can tweet something and see it pop up across the country. Because you can't help women that way.
This one-time volunteer is nervous.
It's not that I care that people know what I did 50 years ago. I don't care. My concern is that we are going to be called to do things again. And I don't want a target because I knew how to do it once. The vigilante laws are going to make it dangerous for anybody who would say, let's go camping. We don't know what we're going to have to do. And women and girls and little girls are going to die.
the Nashville Banner. I'm Demetria Kalodimos.